All right, and we are live. Welcome, Alex. Greetings from the fifth dimension, and welcome to the podcast, Happy Dance's Guide to the Revolution. It's really good to see you, and I'm excited to have you on and talk to you about all sorts of things that are going on right now.
Good to be here. There's lots to talk about.
There is. It's kind of strange. This is my first podcast back in a little while. I was doing some traveling in Europe and stuff. It's been like a month or more since I've recorded one. And the world has changed a little bit since then. So it's funny how quickly things move sometimes. But we're back at it, so back to business. And fortunately, during this time of self-quarantine, things like Skype enable us to still connect with people and have conversations. So it's really, although it's strange, it's still really good to be where we're at right now. There's still a lot of good things going on. So
Indeed.
So before we dive into all sorts of crazy stuff, I got a couple quick housekeeping items I got to hit. A couple shout outs to people who have donated to the GoFundMe page, the Declaration of Interdependence. First, Jamie Fenton. She was a guest on episode 11, and that was one of my favorite podcasts so far. She's a really smart young lady, and we talked about all sorts of different things, but I remember her birth story. She went in pretty good detail in her birth story, and it was really one of the most powerful moments that I've had on the show so far. So that was really cool. So thank you to her for making a contribution there. And then as well as my Uncle Bernard, my Uncle B, he threw a little money in the pot too. So shout out to him. Thanks, Uncle B. He left a funny note on the GoFundMe page that I kind of it almost felt like a little backhanded, but it's still love though. He was even though I don't necessarily agree with all of his principles or whatever. So I thought that was pretty funny. That he still supports me even though he doesn't. We don't necessarily see eye to eye, or at least that's how he perceives it. So pretty cool of him to do that.
Very good.
So big shout outs to them. Okay. One of the first things I like to do on the show here is just kind of talk about how we know each other originally, where we met from. I think it's a good way to set a little bit of the kind of the background. So we both went to North Pocono.
Mm-hmm.
And what year did you graduate?
2009.
Oh, so you're only a year younger than me.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I was in 08, and I graduated with your sister Christine, so shout out to your sister Christine, the homie, And we weren't super close or anything, but I knew you had a bunch of brothers and sisters. You had a big family, didn't you?
Indeed, there are 10 of us.
Holy shit, I thought it was 6, 10. Oh my
10.
God.
Christine's the oldest, and me, and there's just a whole slew behind us. But
wow.
Yeah, it's cool though. I mean, it wasn't exactly an easy way to grow up. It's everybody a lot to fight over when there are that many people under one roof. But now that we're all older and living on our own, it's you can't beat those bonds. It's
yeah.
It's cool to have that many people that you're that close with. So
yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's cool.
Damn. 10. and I didn't know all of you. Obviously, I knew 3 or 4 of you, at least a little bit. But I just thought you guys were a wonderful, beautiful family, and just it's so cool that you just had a kid too. You got a couple-month-year-old baby too, right?
I have a baby, 2-month-old baby. I also have a 10-year-old stepdaughter. So it's
wow,
happy little family.
That's amazing, man. That's really cool.
Yeah, living the dream.
Wow. So it's your first time dealing with a newborn, though, even though you have the stepdaughter there.
I mean, not really.
The kids growing up, right?
I spent the first quarter of my life with an infant in the house.
Yeah. I see. Yeah, that's probably pretty normal too. Historically,
Yeah. Honestly, the biggest thing is the culture shock of not being able to go out for dinner. Obviously we were out to eat every 2 or 3 times a week, and then baby's born, and that's gone. So it on the upside, it sort of prepared us for quarantine. So
I know. Who does the cooking? You guys?
It goes back and forth.
Yeah.
She does the cleaning though. Give her that.
That's good. That's good.
Indeed.
Yeah. So North Pocono, 09. So we go way back, But then it's funny because I titled this thing the Declaration of Interdependence, and it kind of felt like it was something that I had talked about before, but I almost couldn't even place it. But I actually posted this thing back in 2013, which kind of I went back and read it because I knew that we had that exchange. When we reconnected, I went back and looked at our old messages, and I was like, what did I even post that he's referencing? So I went back and was like, the same themes are there. It's 7 years later, and I don't necessarily feel the same way on all issues, and you probably don't necessarily feel the same way on all issues, but we were talking about the same things then. So it's really cool to reconnect with you 7 years later, again talking about these same things, to kind of get back into it and in our current world. And basically what we were talking about then is radical changes to the structure of our democracy. And that's part of the theme of the Declaration of Interdependence, is everything is so rigid and structured, and we recognize that. But if you look at it as art, it doesn't have to be that way. It's an expression of our collective nature. We can structure it however works best for us, as long as we're willing to try new things, give up old ways, potentially fail and retry. But it's really cool to see all that same language 7 years later.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did go back and look at those messages, and I had mentioned something about the world being fucked up. This is going to 2013. Boy, talk about
yeah, you ain't seen nothing yet.
What I think was so bad back in 2013. Right? Looking around today, must have I'm sure it would have been humbling to have a glimpse into the future back then.
Well, specifically what we were dealing with then, and what inspired me to make that post, was a government shutdown.
Okay.
Which I feel we have one of those every other year now on a regular basis, so it's
usual.
Hard to keep track, right?
Mm.
But you chimed in, you connected with me on that. So what is it about those sorts of things that you find so appealing? You showed your support then, I see you active now on social media, promoting your own sort of ideas here and there, and just having discussions with people. So what is it about this stuff that you find so exciting, or that you're attracted to?
I think it's just that we live in such an age of information that I feel like people have no excuse to really be ignorant. Mm-hmm. There's so much information so readily available, and you see so many people that just choose not to look at it. Or choose not to, even worse, see it and choose not to accept it. And I think just in, I wouldn't say I'm very passionate about it, but just that inherently, I see something wrong with that, that mindset, that sort of refusal to change. I'd say it was different, even as close to 15, 20 years ago, because the information wasn't so available. But, as we, get into this age of information, it just, I feel like there's something inherently wrong with that, choosing to remain ignorant.
Right.
Which ignorance is a strong word. It's not necessarily the right word, but
well, it is though. I mean, I myself am ignorant in certain ways to certain issues. It's it doesn't mean you're stupid. It means you're not aware. You don't know.
Right.
Right. And what's tricky now too is you're saying there's so much information, but it's almost too much. One person can't handle all the information. And it's a lot easier to kind of just grasp onto the same ideas and just let those ideas filter the information for you.
Yeah, but it's at this point it's such a conscious effort to do that.
Yeah.
There's a difference between a time where you were sort of assigned a filter, in the sense of whatever your upbringing was, however you got to be where you are, that's the filter you see the world through. But today, you are choosing that filter.
Yeah. My old boss Steve sent me an interesting article that basically argued that they're flooding the zone, the media and everything. They're flooding the zone with bullshit is kind of what the article said, and it's hard to disagree with that. Like, there's so much information, and a bunch of it's so biased, and you're constantly overwhelmed with it that it's like, how are you supposed to hear anything, you know?
Yeah, it's a valid point.
Yeah. No, I agree what you're saying, though. Like, it's all there. It's there, you know? But
Yeah.
there's so much of it there that it can be overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
People are susceptible to taking the easy route and sticking with what they know.
That's definitely true. And the algorithms that just decide what people see on a social media platform certainly are not helping with that.
Yeah. It's a tricky battle for them because they're trying to give you a product, right? And they're trying to give you what you want to see, but that's not necessarily what you should see. It's weird, you know? It's become like a source of news when I don't know if I'm not sure whether that's the right way we should be getting our news.
Yeah, well, it's sort of the same model as CNN versus Fox News. Mm-hmm. The only difference is you're not picking the channel. It's
personalized.
Your past interests have picked the channel for you.
Right. It's personalized for you as an individual based off your history on the platform.
Yeah.
Weird.
It is weird, but I also think I guess that's sort of the good thing about engaging with people that have opposing views on Facebook and whatever, because then that algorithm makes it a point to show you more of those opposing things because it knows you're going to engage with them. So I think even just by actively being willing to talk about them, sort of publicly.
Yeah. It seems like it's smart too. Like, it knows, I don't know, this could be just made up, but it seems that way. Even if I don't like something, but I stop and read it, it even knows that, you know?
Yeah.
Speaking of people arguing about things on here, one of the ideas that you threw out in 2013 was a flat tax. And you said some things about it. I'm not going to read the exact quote, but is a flat tax something that you still think is a good idea? And if so, what is it about that you think well?
It's a good principle, right? So instead of there being a different tax rate for the money you make based on how much you made, based on how you made it, via capital gains, etc. The flat tax rate of for every dollar any given person makes, they pay 10%. Okay, and the theory is that if every dollar made was taxed at that flat rate of 10%, we'd actually bring in more income. We'd have less need for an IRS-style, police agency or policing agency of the tax code, and the average taxpayer would pay less. The most immediate counter-argument to that is that it's too easy to exponentially increase it. So if we implement a system like that at 10%, over the course of 10 years, of course, obviously, government spending never goes down, right? It only goes up. So every year we need a tax increase. So now we're up to 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and before you know it, we're up to a flat tax rate of 30%. Is the best counter argument I've heard to that, and it's a fair counter argument. The other thing is, back in 2013, I didn't understand how complex write-offs were, and I think it would really fit into the corporate model. Right now I own a business, so if I might bring in $10,000 on a job, and I get a $10,000 check, but in order to say $6,000 or $7,000 of that was just in expenses for the job. So you can't apply that a flat tax rate to the business model. The businesses that actively use write-offs constantly. It's not like your standard taxpayer with a standard deduction and maybe a couple of write-offs of whatever seat cushions for their vehicle or something. So I like it in principle, but I see why it wouldn't work. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If,
I grew up around some conservative people, and that was something that they advocated for, was a flat tax. So at one point, I maybe thought it was a good idea, although I was pretty young when we were having those conversations. But like when I think about it now, it seems to hurt the poorest people and help the richest people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least compared to the way we're doing it now. And people are actually advocating for increasing the gap between the rate that we tax poor people and the rate that we tax rich people. And that would actually go the other direction. So for the sake of simplicity, it seems like a decent idea, but I can't imagine how that would result in more revenue for the government. Now, you can make arguments that the government has too much revenue to begin with. But it seems like it would result in less,
Apparently, they don't have enough because what they bring in 3.7 or 3.8 trillion in tax revenue last year, but the 2021 budget proposal is something like 4.5 trillion.
Yeah.
It's amazing how the budget proposal always seems to find an extra, a need for an extra $1 trillion.
Yeah. Not to mention all the trillions that were thrown around now with the coronavirus, just here, there, everywhere.
Yeah,
and it's complicated. I'm not saying that I'm for it or against it. I don't fully understand like the full economic system and the impact that this is going to have. Obviously, it's super complex, but it is kind of like that first one that came out of nowhere was worrisome to a lot of people. The first $1.5 trillion that they handed out immediately, and it kind of boosted the stock market very shortly for a very short period of time. Again, I don't know. It's kind of strange how they got that together so quickly.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk over you.
Oh, go ahead.
I am not an economist. I have my understanding of economics is very elementary.
Right.
But my understanding is that first 1.5 trillion was just the Federal Reserve making money available for lenders. So I saw it was going around that was a bailout or a handout to boost the stock market, when in reality it was just the Federal Reserve, allowing the big banks to borrow money that otherwise wouldn't have been available for them to borrow. Remember, they borrow from the Federal Reserve and they lend that out. So
right. That makes sense. It's like liquidity. They made liquidity available to the banks.
Right. But then, of course, you see it all over social media that $1.5 trillion bailout for the stock market. Well, no, that's not exactly what happened there, guys. Let's simmer down. But
There's a lot of money, though. I wonder if there was better ways to spend it. But it looks like everyone's going to get something here, is what it looks like. I don't know what that means, whether it'll actually happen or what that means in terms of long-term, having to pay all that back. But it seems like they're going to pony up and make sure nobody is – well, they can't catch everybody. The net can't catch everybody, but it seems like they're willing to spend some money. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, well, and it's sort of I was actually discussing this with somebody today. I think of it as a way to help themselves on Capitol Hill, disguised as a way to help the common man and the common business owner. And sort of what I mean by that is they want a speedy recovery of the market, right? So we're a capitalist nation. We love the free market, capitalism through the roof. But also, if we let this economy recover at its own speed and shake out those people that weren't prepared for this, or didn't have any savings, the businesses that were absolutely not prepared for, there are a lot of big businesses, Boeing, like huge companies that are just getting all the hotel chains, anybody travel related, just getting annihilated by this. And if we let the market shake out the ones that weren't prepared for a worst case scenario, the market will sort itself out. businesses will go under. Ones that were prepared will recover and come in and buy them up, and those businesses will come out stronger. But it'll take 2 or 3 years. And that 2 or 3 year recovery is not good for the people in Washington, right? No, number one, tax revenue goes way down, because nobody's making money. Nobody's, or it's going to take a long time for people to start making the money they were making, so they won't be paying the payroll taxes. Businesses, corporations won't be paying nearly as many taxes. So their budget will take an immediate hit, number one. Number two, election coming up in November. Good luck winning that one if the economy is, if something's not done to stimulate the economy before then. So right. That's why I said I feel like it's a stimulus package to help the folks on Capitol Hill, disguised as a package to help the working man. Which is sort of just the nature of the beast, I guess.
Interesting. It's an interesting way to put it. There's been some major votes this past whatever it is, few months, with these bailout checks or whatever you want to call them, and the impeachment votes. People are going to be looking at those one way or another, depending on how they feel come November.
Yeah, but you know what? I feel like it's crazy how far behind us the impeachment feels at this point.
Oh my God, it was like a month ago, but it feels like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I don't think it's even going to be. I don't think anybody's going to remember that come November. Not the masses anyway. I think this election is going to be decided by, how this pandemic scenario was handled.
I thought it was pretty messed up that the 4 states that voted on Tuesday, they didn't do something about that. They were basically declaring a state of emergency, telling people not to leave their houses, but people still have to go stand in line to vote. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's like they should have delayed them. They should pause them or figure something else out. Like, it's ridiculous that happened. I don't know who it hurt more, whether it hurt Sanders more or it hurt Biden more, or maybe it wouldn't have mattered, but it just felt like, I don't know, it just felt wrong to me that they let that happen the way that they let that happen.
Yeah, and especially, back to the this age of technology that we're living in, you'd think there would be a backup system. I understand the argument for not doing, being fully electronic in the voting system. Obviously it's, people are afraid of that. It's hackable. It's too easy to interfere with. But in the case of a state of emergency, it shouldn't, it shouldn't be very difficult to design a system that can be implemented if needed. Just some sort of an app or website, just simple website that you log into. And it's crazy that with all this technology available, and it's so widely accessible that in this day and age, well, you can just have host an election that 50% of the people that would have showed up aren't showing up because they're afraid of a pandemic, or
right, they're afraid for their lives, or they're afraid for their neighbors' lives. They're just making it worse, or it's just a reason not to show up. Maybe they were like on the fence to begin with, and now it's like, well, I'm definitely not going. Yeah, and
it should really be easier to vote. It's.
And that's brings us back to one of the main themes of this podcast, is bringing democracy up to date with technology. So behind, like, we have the capability to hear what people have to say and directly, and to connect people directly. And you're saying that, like, making it electronic and stuff makes it hackable. It's already hackable.
Right.
Like, the only check that we have against it is the exit polls anyway. Like, some of the results, I don't know if it's true. It's so hard to tell what's true, but like showing like discrepancies between poll results and like recorded results. And like if it's of a greater margin. I think it said 4%. Then like there's potential for voter fraud or like a rigged election, basically. Do we have any real way to check that or like anything to enforce that right now? Like I think things like blockchain would open all that right up, and just vote using secure blockchain technology,
Yeah.
And that's something I've talked about with Meyer Salamidi on a past episode. And the technology's there, whether we can put the pieces together and people actually trust it to use it, or whatever. I mean, it's there.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing would be getting people to trust it to use it. Or I mean, obviously not anybody under 35 for the most part. I mean, I feel like we'd still talk about that it's skeptical, but I think we'd be happy to use it. I think you'd get some pretty serious backlash from anybody over 40 or 50.
Right. Yeah.
But it's crazy that it's not, that there's not like a team working on this to make it happen,
Yeah. Like, for example, if it was encrypted properly, you could vote from your cell phone using facial recognition and fingerprint recognition and a secure password, all tied to your voter ID with a sophisticated app that let you vote on all sorts of different things. And you could set it up too where it's not like election day. You could have election week or election month where people have like all month or all week to like go in, log into the app, submit your vote, whatever, And if like you're of the lower economic status and don't have access to a smartphone, like the libraries have them. You can go into the library and like borrow it for the 15 minutes that it takes you to vote or whatever,
Yeah.
It's there. It could be there.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Like I said, they make it's crazy how difficult voting can be. I've got a confession to make. I didn't vote in the 2016 presidential election.
Yeah.
Because I went to I had updated my driver's license with my new address, and when they did that, there was basically a little box I could check to have them update my voter information also. So two birds with one stone, absolutely.
Yeah.
So DMV, that was at the DMV. Now I go to my local polling place. It was probably 6:30, like a half hour before polls close. It worked all day, and I live in Dixon City now. I go into the polling place and find out I'm not on the list to vote there because my voter, the DMV had dropped the ball basically. That they didn't update the information. So they told me, my former address was Kingston, half an hour away. They told me I had to drive to Kingston to vote there at my, my former polling place, which, like I said, just worked probably, a good, 10, 12-hour day or something. It's a half hour before polls close.
Sure.
Yeah. I love my right to vote, but, my vote doesn't matter that much at that point in the process. So, I feel like those sort of things shouldn't happen, and they're probably that's a minority example of reasons.
I don't think it is though. It probably happens a good deal. Minority for sure, but like you weren't the only person that happened to that day, and you weren't even the only person that happened to in Pennsylvania that day.
Yeah, and that was actually something they said that they were getting a lot of that. They actually asked if I switched it at the DMV, and I said yes. So okay, I was like the fourth or fifth person that happened to, which again, it's not that outlandish, but it should be easier to prevent those sort of things when we have the kind of facial recognition. So when I can't get into my iPhone without putting my face in front of it,
right.
We should be able to apply that technology to, something as important as voting.
Right. And if they insist on making it election day rather than like election week or maybe even election month, then it should be a national holiday. For national elections, it should be a national holiday. For state elections, it should be a state holiday. That way, nobody has to worry about like missing work that day. That's.
Yeah.
I mean, look at us now. Like, we're taking all this time off for the quarantine. Like, we can afford a day to vote. There's other things you can do other than go to work for a day. It's not going to kill us. It's not going to crash the economy. You know what I mean? If we just like chill for a day and everyone has time to vote and be more engaged in politics that day or whatever,
It could even be done on a Sunday. There are 2 days that most people already have off.
Yeah.
It could be made easier.
Right.
But one might suspect it's difficult by design.
And that's what I find frustrating is that there is so much institutional inertia, structure, and a lot of times it's just in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't, that's it's set up that way. It's like they built the wall there on purpose so people run right into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's frustrating. Yeah. But so then in your post or in your communications to me after like that discussion back in 2013, you said you feel like it's our generation's responsibility to make a movement towards change. And like that definitely resonates with me. It's something maybe lots of generations feel that way, or maybe generations each have their own sort of thing that they have to go through. But I definitely feel like this is on our shoulders, too.
Well, I'm almost disappointed to admit that I wish I still had that sort of energy towards it. It's crazy how the older I get and the more I understand just how deep the roots of the current system run,
Mm-hmm.
the more you realize how how difficult change actually, any kind of fundamental change actually is.
Yeah.
That being said, I mean, it's any kind of small. You see small changes where you see people like even somebody like Bernie Sanders running for president and having a shot at getting in there. If Bernie wins the presidency, he won't get everything done that he wants to do, but he might take a couple steps in a direction that is more inclusive and a move towards change. And that's all I'll ever get is a couple steps at a time, because there is so much bureaucracy rooted so deep that you can't change the entire system, and not in one shot, not in one decade.
Right.
It's depressing, but it's just the way it is.
And even if he doesn't win, he still helps. The movement behind him still helps to kind of move the needle a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of continues to push progressive agendas forward. Even like, for example, I watched the debate the other night, like between Biden and Sanders, and it was like he kind of made the point that like Biden was against gay marriage, not too long ago, and Sanders has been for it since like the first vote, but like I don't want to say the whole country, but like the majority of the countries shifted on that in that same time period.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be a little bit more of a radical idea than it is today.
Mm-hmm.
So like people like Bernie are ahead of the curve and almost create the curve by being as progressive and open-minded as they are. People finally catch up, Yeah. So we need that, even if he's never elected that position. He and people like him,
right,
popularized those things, brought them into the mainstream.
A voice out there that can be heard, and they're screaming at the top of their lungs. It absolutely influences that curve.
Mm-hmm. So even if we don't see the changes, they'll come.
Yeah. And I just want to say something else on the note of that particular message you just referenced. It reminded me of something somebody had said to me once. Basically, if you're not a liberal in your 20s, you're heartless.
Yes.
But if you're not a conservative by the time you're 40, you're an idiot. And reading that was like, oh shit, my needle has shifted as I'm approaching 30 here.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, dude, for sure. I heard it something like similar saying, but I think it was like if you're not a liberal and when you're young, you're heartless, and if you're not conservative when you're old, you're poor.
Okay, yeah.
That's what I heard it as. But at the similar idea. I mean, if you're being stupid and being poor are sort of related if you've had your whole life to accumulate something and don't have anything.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Assuming all things being equal, which obviously they're not, but.
Right. Of course.
Yeah,
but that was like even browsing through that conversation, like, ooh, little wake up call there. A couple years ago by, you know.
And I can relate to that too because I felt myself becoming more conservative too, like. But then Trump kind of ruined it for me, you know. Yeah. Just when it was like starting to feel cool to be a little bit more conservative, you know, he kind of ruined it for me.
Yeah, you know, he's such a boy. That guy, he's something else. Yeah. My biggest problem with Trump is that he expresses everything with such adamancy when it doesn't belong there. You know, yeah. If he would just say something like, the economy is doing it, we have one of the best, you know, the economy is one of the best it's been in the last decade, or, you know, this economy that we have today is top 25% of all time, I'd be like, yeah, man, I'm behind you, you're right. But when he says it's the best it's ever been, like, yeah. I'm like, no, not quite. Like, everything doesn't need to be that blown out of proportion, you know.
Right. Or I'm the best president there's ever been, or I've done more in my first 3.5 years than any president's ever done, or I know more about windmills than anybody. Like,
yeah. Countless examples. Countless examples. If you would say something like, "I'm doing my best to understand windmills, and I'm listening to the people that understand them," all right, I like that. I like that. But he can't get there. It's weird too. On one hand, I appreciate the principle of somebody who didn't dedicate their life to politics being able to hold that office. Yep. You know, just like literally anybody else.
Yeah, and I had this thought the other day, like if you were all like Trump 2016, you were all about Trump 2016. Whatever.
Yeah.
But if you're still like Trump 2020, I just feel like you just like aren't paying attention, or you're like just willfully ignoring things. I just don't get how you could still be on the bandwagon, you know, after everything that's happened, and I don't know.
Yeah, well, I was sort of like Trump 2012, you know, at that point. It was like, oh,
when he was doing reality TV and shit or whatever, you know.
Businessman in government, but, you know, turns out he runs a lot of businesses into the ground. I read something that said, so I forget what his inheritance was from his father compared to his current net worth.
Yeah, but he would be better off just putting it in CDs or something.
Like if he had just put it in the S&P 500, like he'd be worth something like 5 times what he's currently worth. You know, but
and it's absurd to me too, the people that give Bernie a hard time for having a couple million. Like, that's not even that much money these days, really, especially for an older adult who's like worked professionally for 40 years. Mm-hmm. Like he's got a spot in DC, he's got a spot in his real house, and he's got like some small cabin. Like that's not. I know people with that, you know.
Yeah.
And most of it came from like book sales anyway, and like his serving in Congress. Like it almost seems so contradictory for these people to be like, the government shouldn't have any business with how much money you have, but they're simultaneously criticizing how much money Bernie Sanders has. It's like it's speaking out of both sides of their mouth. It's like insane, you know?
Yeah, that's another thing that bothers me a lot is the hypocrisy. Like the people I most actively engage with it, and I do a bit of instigating on social media by design.
One of the reasons I brought you on, because I want to bring on people who are engaged and at least have things to say. So sorry for cutting you off. Go ahead.
But that's sort of my primary target is hypocrites. Like obviously the past 2 or 3 days have been all about, you know, if the battle of, if you hate, you know, if Trump's not your president, then don't accept the $1,000 check, versus if you hate socialism, don't accept the $1,000 check. You know,
Right.
Which, you know, again, it's just the hypocrisy. And yeah, I love calling out people that are hypocrites and making them, you know, engage and, you know, talk until they just stop messaging or delete me.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another reason why I created this podcast too, because although that is like something that I engage in sometimes too, it's like doesn't always feel productive, you know. Sometimes it just kind of feels draining and like not useful, and other times not so much, you know. It kind of, I guess it depends on the attitude that you're bringing to it, I suppose, you know. But I definitely prefer this platform of just bringing people on, even if I do disagree with them on some things, and like getting to the bottom of it is like, what do we really disagree on? Like, what is it fundamentally that we don't align? You know, where don't we align?
Yeah, and I love that. I love, you know, honest, constructive, you know, argumentative discussions. You know, and I guess anybody who doesn't enjoy that kind of banter has, you know, are exactly the type of people that aren't going to change anyway, you know?
Yeah. And it's almost like a trap a little bit, because you mentioned being like contradictory or like hypocritical. Let's use the word contradictory instead of hypocritical, because I think it applies better here. But like some things are contradictory and exist in like a state of contradiction, you know? And therefore you need balance in them. Like, for example, I didn't really get into it with the guy, but he said something about like part of the problem is like we're not unified as a country, that we're not unified. So like I was thinking about it, and it's like, okay, we need to be unified, right? That's part of it. But we also have to be careful not to unify behind things that we shouldn't be unified behind. So there needs to be a struggle for like, there needs to be a little bit of divisiveness to like decide what we should be unifying behind, you know? So if you don't have the struggle and like the disunity, and you arrive at a place of unity like arbitrarily or maliciously, and that's worse almost than being divided.
Yeah, it needs to be something more complex than, you know, just being united behind the flag or, you know, the name, you know, the America. You know, it needs to be a set of principles versus, you know, the idea of country. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And I think that's part of the problem too, is that we're entering kind of a new age, like a global age, and the whole like blind patriotism thing, just some people don't buy it. Like it's not really my bag, you know? I'm like, sometimes I feel more like an earthling than I do like an American, you know? And I think a lot of people resonate with that.
No, absolutely. I mean, especially blind patriotism. That's you hit that nail on the head. That, you know, if this whole mindset of if you don't, you know, if you don't this, then you don't love America. You know, and that's that's an ugly mindset. You know,
it's dangerous. It's really dangerous.
Absolutely.
You know, and I've been on social media over the past like couple months a few times, like comparing it to Nazism, because to me it is, you know, it's like very much cut from the same cloth of like, make America great again, make Germany great again, like lying press, fake news, like it's the same playbook, you know? And we just got to be really careful to like not fall into those same traps of patriotism and strong military presence and being the, you know, I don't know. It's just dangerous. We know where that leads.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I'd like to think it could never get that bad again. But you know, if you told somebody that in, you know, 1927, was it? they might have said it. You know, if you told some, you know, a 1920s German that they were a couple years away from leading people into death because they practiced a different religion, they would have also said, that Adolf has a big mouth, but he's not that bad.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So
I revisited the timeline recently because I was interested in their like economic progress from like the 20s and through the start of the war, and it was pretty jarring. So you had like the stock market collapse, which I believe was in 29, if I'm not mistaken. I feel stupid if I'm wrong, but I think it was in 29. And then by like the early 30s, Hitler's kind of rising to power, and by 33, he's chancellor, And like if you look at the economic, I think it was measure of GDP over that time period, and it's like Hitler comes to power in 33, and now it's like 38. Well, you've had like 10% economic growth year over year over year over year for the last 5 years with Hitler as chancellor. And you haven't done anything terrible, terrible, terrible yet. Now, people might bash me on that. I don't know what he actually did, but it hadn't been like full concentration camp mode, invading countries mode until I think like 38, So you have a few good years of like unemployment's way down. Everybody that didn't have a job and had to deal with the Great Depression is now back to work. Everyone's in factories building stuff. We're restoring our military might. The economy's booming, Germany's going to be the best country in the whole world. This nation's going to last for 100 years. Like you're wrapped up. It's easy to get wrapped up if all those things are going for you.
Yeah.
And the person that's leading it is saying the things that you want to hear. Blaming these hard times on these people that you already don't like. You already have negative feelings towards them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get roped right up into it.
Yeah. That's it makes you wonder what the mindset was like, 2 or 3 years post-war for these people that were into it, and now they're Nazis on trial. They must have been standing there like how the fuck did that but but it's just the way it goes, I guess, where you've drank the Kool-Aid, and now all of a sudden this is just part of it. You're running a concentration camp, and the next thing it's like, holy shit, that escalated quickly.
Yep.
But right, there are a lot of similarities, and it is
yeah. And I would, I'm not going to make the case. I don't have the evidence to make the case that Trump is on the same planet as Hitler. I wouldn't. What I'm saying is that the playbook is the same.
Well, it's. I mean, Trump's a manipulative guy.
Right.
Like that's his MO. And Hitler was too. It's interesting though. I think Trump could be pretty easily manipulated, and it makes me wonder if that's something if there's somebody behind the scenes doing that. And the reason I say that, there's I read a book. It was it's called something like Negotiating as If Your Life Depends on It, by a guy named Chris Voss. He was a former FBI hostage negotiator, and now he runs more of a something in the corporate world, handling negotiations. But he wrote a book detailing various negotiation tactics, and one thing that he mentions is in negotiating with hostage takers, they often have the alpha style negotiation of straight these are my demands, give them to me, or death to hostage.
Right.
Like that real alpha. This is what I want. That's the only thing I'm going to accept. And the very immediate way to deal with that is open-ended questions. How am I supposed to do that? How do I know he's even alive? Et cetera, et cetera. I think it'd be really easy to use that style of speaking to Trump to sway him in a particular direction. The old the adage of negotiation is letting the other guy have your way. I think Trump's somebody that could be manipulate in that sense, and it makes me wonder if that's something that's already being done, or if it's something that that may end up happening. It'd be interesting to see somebody get in his head about like something like climate change being as big of a problem as it is, and see him just all of a sudden flip a switch and decide it's something that needs to be dealt with and just go nuts dealing with it. Yeah, something, little conspiracy theory edge, but something to think about.
Yeah, I have that conspiracy theorist side of me too. So I'm always looking at these things a little bit skeptical, no matter what it is, or like. And I'm not about to say that this coronavirus thing is like some sort of conspiracy, because I don't think that it is, but we have to be careful with crises, what we allow. And then, if we give up certain freedoms to account for the crisis, we got to make sure we get those back when this is over. You know what I mean? Like, it's just tricky navigating those waters.
Yeah. No, you're right. And it's interesting, something they keep talking about in regards to consumers. So obviously we were saying before, a ton of industries hurting bad. But they're talking about, on the other side of this, what new habits are consumers going to come out with? We get used to living indoors, and, now maybe all of a sudden something like going to, the movie theater isn't as appealing, or eating at restaurants. Maybe now all of a sudden, something like Blue Apron is, a much bigger company than, than restaurant chains, because we got so used to using it and decided we liked it. So, if they talk about that in the, from consumer perspective, it also applies to freedoms. We adopt this new, lifestyle out of necessity, but once we get to the other side of it,
Yeah, like even stuff like people working from home. How many people were getting a hard time about working from home, or now they have been asked to work from home, and now they're going to be asked to come back in the office, and they're be like, "Nah, I'm working from home. Leave me alone,"
Yeah. Also, I was twice as productive. Why do I need to come into your office?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that'll be interesting too. It'll be interesting to see if this goes on long enough, there'll be a nice set of data to see how, productivity improved or declined, with all these people working from home. And you might see, big companies saying, "Oh, we don't actually need to, this 10,000 square foot office building. We can make do with 1,000 square feet and have everybody work from home."
Yep.
And then you see impact on the commercial real estate end, and giant ripple effects. This whole thing is.
See impacts on the environment that we're already seeing. Not as many people driving around, not as much buildings being heated and cooled. It's a big energy usage, all that stuff.
Yeah, you're not kidding. And you know what? When you go to work, you don't turn your heat off. Most people, maybe some people do, but for the most part, you go to work, you're using heat in two places.
Right. Yep. You might turn it down a little bit, but most people want to have their house warm when they come home.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting, to see what the other side of this looks like.
Yeah, what the new normal is. It'll be interesting, And I know it's silly to think about sports at a time like this, but it is kind of upsetting that we're just completely without sports at the moment.
Yeah. We bought a bunch of lottery tickets the other day because we had company over, and I was like, well, there's not much to do. I guess that's a cheap way to get a little thrill.
Yeah, that's funny.
Spent money on scratch off tickets.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm going to jump subjects here a little bit. You mentioned in somewhere you posted, it was more of a comment. It wasn't a post, but you mentioned something about your dad as a doomsday guy.
Oh, yeah.
I want to hear about that because I know some people like that, but my dad's definitely not one. So I want to hear what that was like, and how you might how that might impact how you think about these things or have thought about these things in general.
Yeah, well, I think the exact phrasing was "my old man's a doomsday guy" because
Yes.
he sort of he branded himself as the old man. The old man is one of his go-to catchphrases, and boy, we have a lot of fun with it now. But it was always you people have no idea what's coming. I'll
Yeah.
I'll be dead, but you'll say the old man was right. so, so yeah, but he's just always always had that mindset. I guess so. He's an investor, is an investor, and was always heavy in precious metals. And actually, that comment you're referencing was specifically talking about the dollar. Somebody was saying that the dollar is going to be worthless and etc. And to that I say, um, if if the market thought the dollar was going to zero, the price of gold would be through the roof, $10,000 an ounce. You'd see that immediately. Now, if you see the price of gold double or triple, like real quick, um, take action because shit's about to get real. But yeah, he's always just been that sort of worst case scenario is coming. And I heard he talked about that when it was during the oil, when oil went up to $100 a barrel. He actually called that one. I think he said it was going to go to $200 a barrel, but back when oil was $20 a barrel, he that was one thing he said was that it was going to go nuts, and it did. But to him, it was going to go nuts and stay nuts, and it was going to be the end all be all of the economy. And sure enough, peace was made. We went to war over oil. I mean, weapons of mass destruction. Excuse me. And balance was restored, and everything came back. And every sort of hiccup that has happened has been the what he would describe as a major catastrophe. And every time I saw it, sort of not really end up being that, and it's sort of given me this this sort of this too shall pass sort of mindset that so far no matter how bad it gets, it's going to be okay. For the most part, there are a couple. I was thinking about this because he had mentioned that in the notes, so it got me thinking. What does actually scare me in terms of real social and economic collapse?
Yeah.
And that is drones, weaponized drones, controlled by a rogue operator. That would that's something that the technology exists today, that it could be if somebody had enough money and enough access to the technology and to explosives.
Yeah.
It could very easily disrupt a lot of things really quickly, and that's something I could see having a real lasting like a full 5 to 10 years of not coming back from easily. Something like this. This sort of recession that we're going into. It's got an immediate cause, and we have an immediate means to deal with it. We've got all the labs and the factories in place to figure out how to we can handle it from the economic end. We can handle it from the solving the problem, create a vaccine distributed end. Something like weaponized drones controlled by somebody that or a group of people that we don't know where they are. That's something that could be get pretty real pretty fast. And it's funny. That's not even funny. There was a simulation, like a Black Mirror style video going around for a while, and it was the scenario was it was basically one parent drone that carried 15 mini drones. Parent drone sticks to the side of a building, blows a hole in the wall. All the little ones disperse, go in through the hole, use facial recognition to find a particular face, stick to the forehead, and a little bit of C4 goes off. Boom. And it was just a simulation, but it's crazy scary that all the technology to create that exists today and is not that expensive. You know?
Yeah.
So try not to be real doomsday, but there are definitely possible scenarios that, could be, real serious worldwide economic collapse and mass hysteria that aren't that science fiction anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
Yep. Well, the old man was right.
Yeah, the old man was right. Yeah. And speaking of old mans, my old man had me watching like all the Terminator movies when I was far, far, far too young to be watching those movies. So all that's sort of what you're talking about. I mean, you're talking about somebody controlling it, but those drones and those machines and robots and whatever were obviously controlled by an artificial intelligence of some kind, So all that stuff's been on my mind for too long, my whole life.
Yeah, so but it's interesting to compare the two because in the like a Terminator style movie, the bad thing is big and visibly scary, whereas in reality, I mean, it can be the size of a of a $50, that is
Be smaller. Could make like robotic mosquitoes or something and infect you with diseases. You know what I mean? I don't know how far. They can't be that far off.
Yeah, no, that's the thing too. People talk. Of course, there's always conspiracy theory around something. Like coronavirus. People are saying that. So somebody said the Democrats created the coronavirus to take down Trump. Like, okay, calm down. Number one, but number two, if we were to find out someday that a small group of eco-terrorists created this on purpose, that's not even hard to believe. If you told me that today, I'd entertain it.
Sure.
Some people just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
And you get people that are smart enough and mad enough. It's very possible to accomplish it.
Yeah. It's crazy to think about too. And that with the something I learned from studying, this connects with artificial intelligence too. So I'm going to see if I can connect these two ideas. Studying Dr. Jordan Peterson's work, something that he says is people think that they have ideas. They're wrong. Ideas have people. So if you have like a certain idea in your head, such as people are destroying the world and the environment, and that's like the idea that has you most, that would actually justify eco-terrorism, and connecting that with something like artificial intelligence, like the danger is like if you were to program an AI and you give it the objective to like reduce pollution, like the best way to reduce pollution is like to wipe everybody out, So it's like you got to be careful, It's like you got to be careful what the highest ideal is, because your highest ideal is your directive, and that drives all of your actions,
Yeah, and that's I guess that's sort of why you have to have people around you with conflicting ideals, because if you just surround a group of 4 or 5 people that have that much drive and the right amount of intelligence can be really destructive, whereas sometimes all it takes is an outsider looking at you saying, what the fuck are you doing? Get your head on straight, but you're going down. This is a bad idea.
Right.
It's
and whether that process takes place like externally by having different people around you with different views, or even better, you have to manage that like as an individual. Like you can't just have one idea, or you can't just have one idea have you and that be your own thing. You have to be able to balance all these conflicting and somewhat contradictory ideas and come to a balance that like actually works,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Can confirm.
And I think back to Jordan Peterson, he would argue that like religion itself was created to like help us understand that process of balancing ideals and understanding the difference between right and wrong and kind of establishing that as a society, and that process took place over a long period of time, and we're left now here in the modern era with like these records of this process taking place and like the documentation of it. And we have that, like, but we also have it like next to our modern laws and modern everything else too. So it's like, but you could see how some of those stories might have played a vital role in like establishing some of those things over time.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have a lot of input on that, but
are you religious at all of any kind?
Oh no. Have you heard the OAR song that says I don't want to go to heaven if I can't get in?
No, that's funny though.
That's sort of my take on it. Is if there actually is all that stuff and the way I live my life isn't good enough for it, then I don't want to be there anyway. But I do think you could pretty easily reference the something like the Ten Commandments as a guideline, a set of principles you can find throughout most religions,
right.
And find that most people religious or not, sort of live by it. It's just not doing it out of the fear of God.
Right.
And I think that's kind of toxic, but also, humans like community. We like to be around people. We like to feel like we're part of something. And, that church fills that void for a lot of people. And I don't necessarily think it's healthy because, again, it's, motivated by that fear of God, and there's somebody who's, obviously preaching and encouraging that lifestyle is the only lifestyle, and people get too wrapped up in it. And I think that's what I really have. My real problem with religion is the sort of cult type aspect of it, not not the principles. And
yeah,
I think
that's common for a lot of people, that the sort of the dogma and the rigidity of some of it, and like turns people away from it, especially people of our generation, and I felt very similarly for a long time, in certain ways I still do, but I definitely did have some sort of a transformation in thinking after looking at it, like some of these stories, like psychologically rather than literally,
Okay.
That helped me out a lot. And I found usefulness in it once I was able to look at it that way, rather than like scientifically and literally, which I was kind of stuck in that mind frame,
Interesting. Yeah.
So like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, I feel like I might be able to relate to that in the sense that if that epiphany is coming for me, it hasn't hit yet, because I take everything as literally as possible.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. First of all, I love the quote. Who was that band by? What was the band?
OAR.
OAR.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get to heaven if I can't get in. Is that what it is?
I don't want to go to heaven if I can't get in.
Go to heaven. Yeah. First of all, that's awesome. I love that. So let's talk about heaven for a second. I would probably agree with you that it's not this place that exists after you die where everything's great, but you only get to get in if you were like a really good person or whatever. It all seems ridiculous and kind of there's no real evidence to support that. I don't find any use in even having that idea in my head,
Right.
But an idea that I do find useful is that heaven is real. It's here on earth, and you can go there when you're on the right path. It's like even something as simple as like playing basketball with your buddies, and you're just there and you're playing, and when you're playing, everyone's having a good time and it's a good game, and you're not thinking about like all the distracting things in the world, and you're You're just there and you're in it and you're just enjoying yourself. That's like a little piece of heaven right there. And then you can like expand that outwards, and then like you go home and you have a good home life too. Like, your wife loves you, you love your wife, you got great kids, you're taking care of them. Like, everyone's communicating and everything's going really well. Like, that's a little piece of heaven right there. But it takes a lot of work to get to that spot. You really got to like do what you're supposed to do and be in order to really be there, because. And a lot of times people are there and don't even realize they're there, or like they're not really thinking about it, But it's a lot more obvious when people are in hell, and there's people walking around in hell too who are just miserable all the time and like, feel sorry for themselves and make the lives around make the lives of the people around them worse, It's like all of that is real if you look for it, but it's not like a place. It has nothing to do with death. It has to do with life.
So, and interesting at that point, I had heard it said, somebody said recently that it's important to accept that you're not going to be happy all the time. Like everybody has ups and downs. Life gets mundane. Seasonal depression is real. It hits all of us. You know what I mean? Like you're never going to be happy all the time, and being aware of that, makes you really, have a mindset that appreciates those pieces of heaven. Those moments where it is, you're blissfully having a good time, without a care in the world. Basically the first 8 years of your life, except now you only get it in snippets.
Yeah, if you had a good life,
That's true.
It spreads too. Like your parents, if you had your first 8 years of your life, you were basically in heaven. Like your parents must have did a damn good job. You know what I mean? They took care of you. They made sure you were in a good spot. Like, nobody messed with you, and you were just able to be free and be a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then thinking about this, like this Corona thing, tying into this, like the story that I'm reminded of is the story of Noah, And again, back to the literalism, like, do I think that some guy put, animals 2 by 2 into a giant boat and like save them? Probably not. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And if he did, he probably had help from aliens or something.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get back to that later. But, but if you look at the story psychologically, and like what it's trying to tell you psychologically is that like if you make the right sacrifices in the present, then you can weather the worst of storms.
Mm-hmm.
And you can bring your family with you. And when it's all done, you can start over, And you have to do that on an individual basis with yourself and your family, but then like your government too. Like we're in a stage now where we're part of local governments, world governments. If they're corrupt, like the example that he uses when he talks about it too is like the in New Orleans, the levees.
Mm-hmm.
They knew those levees weren't good enough. They didn't invest in them properly. They didn't do what they were supposed to do to kind of be prepared for that storm, and they suffered as a result.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. I never looked into that at all.
About New Orleans.
Yeah, past what I saw in the headlines, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's actually really sad to hear that, considering that they built a city below sea level.
Mm-hmm.
You would have thought that would have been a high priority.
Right. Right. But if your system is corrupted, or if you're corrupted as an individual, then you're not going to be ready for when the flood comes.
Mm-hmm.
And the flood isn't always a flood. Like in this case, we're dealing with a potential global pandemic, right? And how prepared are we to deal with it? Have we made the right sacrifices so we could deal with it? Because in theory, they could have built those levees bigger and stronger and able to withstand bigger storms than they even imagined, right? But they didn't. And we could have had infrastructure to deal with a huge surge into hospitals to deal with these things, but we don't. We didn't invest in those things. We're not really fully prepared. Now we might be, we're ramping up preparations, obviously, and we're prepared to a certain extent,
Mm-hmm.
and just like I'm sure Noah could have built his ship up a little better, a little bit bigger, or brought more animals in, right? But there's obviously a balance in that too, But it's just interesting. And I think those stories are there to help us know that and to apply those lessons to other things,
Yeah, well, I sort now, full clarification, I haven't read the Bible, but I think those stories are written to be sort of relatable by design, that, they're those sort of life struggles, are life struggles that every person and every system encounters.
Correct.
If you're to your point, if you're not how do I want to phrase this? Okay, so you hear people talk about, this person has, saying they have all the bad luck, or the other guy has all the good luck. I blow a tire on my way to work, and I get fired because I was late for work, and my luck is, I've got all the bad luck. Well,
right.
do I have bad luck, or did I fail to keep the tires on my car? Did I fail to make updating the tires on my car a priority?
Right.
Did I get fired because I was late one time, or did I roll in hungover 20 minutes late a half a dozen times, and this was the final straw?
Right.
You know what I mean? That
Exactly.
sort of consistency, consistently taking little steps in the right direction, allows you to be in a position where something big, be it bad or good, has the potential to happen, or does happen, or a big opportunity is presented with you,
mm-hmm.
in front of you, or a big tragedy is in front of you. Take those constant little steps of moving in the right direction allow you to be prepared for it, or at least capable of reacting to it. I don't think we as our government is anywhere near that. I think our government is terribly toxic and not at all designed to handle opportunity or tragedy, well. But
yeah, it's certainly possible, and if it's not this flood that takes it out, something's going to take it out eventually. Whether we're long dead by then or we're right in the mess of it.
Yeah.
Even castles made of sand fall into the sea eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. You could see these type of global events, start happening at a compounding, or at the time between them getting compoundingly shorter.
Yes.
That's the same way. Technology increases by 100-fold every year. Every year. What's that?
What increases by
technology? They say.
Oh yeah.
The amount of available technologies, supposedly I don't know if it's still continuing at that rate, but allegedly it was. Every
it doubles every 18 months. I think it's called Moore's law. I think.
Okay, yeah. So you would think the ability to use that technology for bad or good, theoretically, but for the sake of this conversation, for bad, also increases at that rate.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the stakes are constantly being raised. Yeah, that's the right word. The stakes are constantly being raised. I was thinking about this the other day, like with this virus thing. Like if this hit a small tribe, I don't know, 10,000 years ago, even if it wiped out the whole tribe, like that tribe didn't interact with other tribes, or at least it was on a very limited basis. So like it never had the opportunity to spread to another continent, let alone like 100 miles away, But because we're so connected globally, it could, it's rapidly hitting all all places where civilization exists, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which actually, to that point, that's what it's menacing that Trump didn't take it more seriously in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because if you had listened to the initial reports, they were saying, this is crazy contagious. It's gonna come here. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. That should have sent on a light bulb that said, hey, products have been, and I'm pretty sure the early reports detailed how resilient it was. That it lives for, it's not like, something that dies as soon as it comes out of the body. It lives on surfaces for a while.
Mm-hmm.
The light bulb should have gone on that, we need to start getting measures in place to be prepared for that, because, hey, it's probably already here. There have been 10,000 shipping containers that, crossed the ocean since that first case was, allegedly affected, since
right.
they, pinpointed ground zero. It's frustrating that instead he chose the it's a hoax mindset.
Yeah. And so he called it a hoax there early on, so that was obviously frustrating. Even though I will admit that now it seems like they're finally taking it seriously and they're doing a real lot.
Agree. I give full credit there. I think they're on the ball right now.
But then looking back further into history, the way that I understand it, and I could be wrong on this, but the way I researched it is, it seemed like he had already let like that team walk. Like, he's supposed to have a team that's prepared to deal with these things, and he was like, oh, we don't need them right now, and they like left or whatever, and he never replaced them and never dealt with that. So it's like, goes back to the Noah thing. Like, he wasn't prepared for it because he didn't have the things in place to be that are supposed to be there, whether he was too tough to deal with and they didn't want to deal with them, or he cut them for budgetary reasons or whatever. Those people that were supposed to be there, that would have been in his ear on the first reports, weren't in his ear.
Right. Yeah. And that is the way I understand it also. And back, to go to his, whatever the line was, that we've got the best doctors. We can get them in one phone call. Whatever.
Right.
It would have been, at least at the advisory level. It's not like you need,
right.
Teams of doctors stationed throughout the country, but like they should be part of your, the immediate people that are giving you advice on how to deal with something like a global pandemic, for example.
Yeah. I want to go back to your religious views, or like lack thereof religious views.
Mm-hmm.
You maybe call them like philosophical views or whatever, because I believe that they kind of, one feeds into the other, being religious into the political, or philosophical into the political. And how do you feel that way? Are there certain like philosophical ideologies that you carry with you that you feel like apply to your sort of political thinking, or how do you kind of feel about all that?
Not, I mean, I guess to a degree, but not to the point that I could write them down on paper. I mean, I think I've got I've obviously got a moral compass. We all do. I like to think mine's pretty well calibrated. But also there are people you disagree with on, something like healthcare, where, there's take all the financial out of it. Some people just don't think it should be a human right. Some people don't think it should be something you're born with having. And that's, I mean, that's I disagree with that. I think it's, especially, the cost compared to how much the budget is anyway, that I feel like we should be able to fit it in. But that's just a disagreement at the individual moral level, and I mean, I don't think there's anything particularly bad about that.
And really, like, ideas like that, I think underlying that, what the real disagreement is like individual responsibility versus like social responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you don't have enough to pay for your health care, well, that's on you. and you basically don't get to make it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Versus everyone's going to chip in, and that way everyone can at least make it to like the first rung and not be suffering needlessly, you know?
Yeah. Sort of weird how the individual mindsets of the same kids that didn't weren't on a sports team in high school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, there's a lot of weird overlap between the people that are active on social media that I know that were like I don't want to say any names, but like certain ones I'm just like, dude, didn't you like assault a police officer? Like,
ooh.
You know?
I don't know who you're talking about, but I feel like whoever it is gonna
Like,
get that.
why are you talking shit right now? Like, didn't you like drop out because you like now all of a sudden you're like want to be opinionated and educated and smart? It's like,
yeah,
you're late. You're late to the party.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know. It's like frustrating and like they're trying to make like complex political arguments and they don't know the difference between like our nation and our nation. Like they're using ARE.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I mean,
so like,
you know,
like you're like how am I supposed to take you seriously when you write like that?
Well, my thing is, especially anybody that wants to talk about any kind of economic policy. You know, if you know, I am, you know, fully happy to throw my hands up and say, you know, I am a fucking child when it comes to understanding economics, and I've taken college level econ classes, and I've read books independently on economics, and I know just enough to understand I don't fucking get most of it.
Yeah.
You know, and if you want to throw around economic policy, you know, like we can't do universal health care because taxes, whatever. If you want to try and talk economic policy, and take a micro level economy and apply it to the macro that is our nation, and you aren't happy to stand up and say I don't actually really understand this, then you don't even get a seat at the table. You know, we'll sit here and talk about it because I can beat you, but
right. That's why I'm asking you whether like the religious or the philosophical feed into the political, because I feel like they have to, because you're not an expert at economics, but you still have like a take on universal health care, because like part of your philosophy is that we should be prioritizing the people at the bottom a little bit and making sure that we're providing enough for the people at the bottom that they're not needlessly suffering, even though they're at the bottom. It's like I feel like it feeds into our political ideologies whether we realize it or not.
Well, I have a hard time believing it wouldn't be better for the system overall. If the people at the bottom, had an easier time, like something like a broken bone. If you're somebody that doesn't have a lot of money, that's a huge deal. I've got a broken a boxer break that has my knuckle all fucked up because when I was 19 and broke it punching a soda machine, I didn't have the money to go to a hospital.
Right.
And if that was something more than just a small bone in my hand, if that had been my leg, that would have been a devastating uprooting. Got kicked out of my apartment because I couldn't work, couldn't pay rent. It's if you take that sort of fear of getting injured or getting sick out of the lower class, and you take the not only the fear but the consequences of getting injured or getting sick, I have a hard time believing it wouldn't be worth the cost of worth the price of admission it takes to get there.
Yeah.
But again, I'm just an asshole with opinions. I don't know if that's true.
No, it's true. And especially like if we're gonna tout the economy and say how great the economy is, then like we should be able to afford like taking care of people. you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think too about, let's say we're in a tribe. We're like, I don't know, 10,000 years ago, or maybe even more. And it's like a pretty good tribe. Like we're hunting and everything's going good. And you get injured on the hunt. You know, not a life-threatening injury, but it's like an injury. Well, like now you have to come back and like the medicine man has to treat you, you know? What are we going to do? Like burn your hut down if you can't like pay the bill, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, no, the medicine man's going to take care of you. We're going to get you up and running again. We're going to get you back out there hunting with the guys as soon as we can, you know? In the meantime, your family still gets to eat. And if we go a month and nobody gets hurt while we're hunting, like the medicine man still gets to eat too, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's enough for everybody. If we're doing well, it should be enough to cover all our bases, you know?
Yeah. Well, so it's an interesting point that a lot of times the people that are against it's so in that example, you know,
Yeah.
everybody's involved, right? But when you apply it to the macro scale, the guy who is against people being on welfare, against, you know, government helping people, he doesn't actually, for the most part, doesn't interact, doesn't know with the people, you know, doesn't have conversations with the people that are the ones that need it. And I think there's that's a real part of the disconnect, is that, you know, they don't feel like these people are part of their community, you know, but.
Yeah, there's a huge disconnect, and it's part of our tribal nature too, where like if someone's in your tribe, then yeah, you'll use all the resources necessary to take care of them. But if you feel like they're not in your tribe, then it's like, no, absolutely not. So, and how do people draw those lines? And they're drawn in their own imaginations, basically, you know, like, is it your local community? Is it your state? Is it your country? Like, is it people who have the same skin color as you? Like, what is it that you know, I don't mean you personally, but like, how do you decide?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have my one cousin. He's an older cousin, 40 or so. Big conspiracy theory guy. And one that he brought up one time was something to the effect of the reason they, you know, they being the government or whoever, you know, insert your the reason they push, you know, equality the way they do now is because it helps to eliminate our tribalism and makes us easier to control, which is, you know, some really out there conspiracy stuff, that there's that much of a, you know, cause and effect design plan behind it all, you know, to say that the reason people want equality is because other people want to control us. But it's an interesting point. Or not point, you know, it's an interesting set, you know, to consider, you know, what changes if that sort of tribalism mentality goes away, and all of a sudden we actually do all feel like, you know, we as a nation are equals and not, you know, different types set up throughout the same, you know, under the same umbrella of government.
Right. Or apply it to a global scale too. If we, you know, the Illuminati goal of like the one world government, you know, if we were all under one umbrella, then one sweeping change would impact everybody. You know? Where now you have conflict between nations, and it's almost like, although it has its negatives, it creates like a buffer for tyranny, even though we have our own tyranny in our own tribes. It's interesting.
It's funny. It's I'm pretty sure it's Neil deGrasse Tyson line. And he's a charismatic, well-spoken scientist, so you know he's reasonable. It's something to the effect of, you know, you are 99.5% similar as the person you have the least in common with. You know, you're on a DNA level.
Sure.
you are 99.5% the same as a black woman, Jordan. You know, on the level of DNA.
Right.
You
Yes.
know, but we love to hate each other for being different. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. It comes back to the balance thing too. You know, it's like, because we all have our own egos that are trying to protect us, and have our, I think it's biological too. It's like have our DNA be part of the future, you know? But it's almost outdated. Like all of the DNA is all human DNA. So like as long as most of us do pretty well, like we will live on, you know, like your DNA might not, if for whatever reason, you know? But as long as society does well, the human race isn't going anywhere, you know? So like but like humans don't think that way, at least not entirely, you know? We're not anti-colony, you know?
It's hard to mess with that, you know, that biological drive to, you know, keep your last name alive, you know, keep your own DNA alive.
Right. Yeah. What else do we talk about here? Do you have any questions for me right now? Anything you can think of, either related to the Declaration or other ideas regarding technology and democracy and things?
Not really. I feel like we you know, had ample back and forth here. Anything I had to get out, I feel like I did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. So one of the last things I like to touch on is the upcoming election.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling about all that? I mean, when I was doing this podcast most recently, which was like a month ago, the landscape was a lot different. It's basically dwindled down to now Biden and like sort of Sanders, if he can survive and win some states, I guess. So he's almost out too. It looks like. It's weird. I'm not sure, but like, so maybe even before that, you could even include some of the other people that were running if you want. Like who, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here, but I guess for right now, who do you like that's left on the table? Why do you like them? And then if they're not still on the table, who did you like previously?
I don't know. It's tough because my you know, my politics are all over the place. You know, I can agree with just about, you know, anybody, you know, a liberal, a conservative, a socialist, you know, I can find happy points with everyone. I do, I don't wholeheartedly agree with Bernie on everything.
Right.
I do think on the overall curve, if he were to get in office, we'd look back and see that as a turning point in a different direction, where maybe we start saying, okay, the military doesn't need 50 cents of every tax dollar. You know, we can allocate, you know, we have this massive, you know, almost $4 trillion budget. You know, we can do some better things with that. Or we can reduce that budget and let people, you know, keep more money in the working people's pockets and let them choose to do something better with that.
Right.
So I think Bernie getting in there would be a good start to adjusting that curve. I don't think Biden beats Trump.
Me neither.
I think Trump's going to win it, especially, you know, now that he's on course for actually handling this crisis responsibly. Actually, I made the point yesterday, that the news conference yesterday, he looked like he had an aha moment that was like, oh shit, this president thing is serious. You know, like that was how I felt about his demeanor in the news conference yesterday, and he continued that into today. I think that with all of the stimulus packages going out, people are going to love getting those checks. Number one. Number two, they're going to successfully rebound the economy. I think 2 months is a realistic timeline. Everybody who lost so much out of their 401k is going to see that rebound. A lot of people are getting into the stock market now. I mean, they're calling this the best buying opportunity since 2008. A lot of people are getting in now. They're going to be making a lot of money again, by September, October. I think going into November, he's going to have a really, a pretty positive image. And I don't think Biden beats him, number one. Number two, it's going to be difficult for Biden to criticize the things that happened before the virus, before Corona, because it's, like we were just talking about, the impeachment feels like it was months ago. It's going to be a tough election for to beat Trump, and I don't think Biden's the guy to do it. So I won't be at all surprised to see 4 more years. Yeah.
I pretty much agree with exactly what you said. That's the writing on the wall, is what it seems like to me.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that happens or not, I don't know. And if for some miracle Biden does win, first of all, I'll be surprised, because I don't know too many people excited about him.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people who are excited about Bernie, and for some reason, people who are still excited about Trump. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anybody who's excited about Biden.
Yeah, I mean they're sort of so like my sister's in the blue no matter who camp, right? So
Right.
I think they're you're going to see enough of that mindset to to make it a race, but like I said, I have a hard time believing Biden comes out on top.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the system is structured that way that it is, and again it comes back to the motivation for this podcast and this movement, because it's like insane that we're only given 2 choices. Like the fact that it's blue no matter who is absurd. Like I heard an acquaintance of mine once say, I would vote for the devil himself if he ran as a Republican.
Yeah.
And that's like basically the same thing as blue no matter who. You're saying the same thing, you're just saying it differently.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's right back to tribalism. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not blind nationalism, but it's blind team loyalty.
Yeah. Yep. People love to have someone to root for. That's why the NFL has the market it has.
Yeah. And obviously all the major sports are affected right now, and I'm curious of how long this is all going to last, and whether it impacts football too, whether we get a conclusion to basketball season or whatever. It depends on what you're into. I mean, I think everything's affected in different ways. Will they play on without people? Will they get people back in there? Who knows? I think they'll all handle it differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
And it seems silly to worry about sports at a time like this, and I'm not worried, but it's such because I think about it a lot too. It's not the first time I thought about where all of these people pay all sorts of good money to come into this place to watch these people run up and down a field or a court with a ball. It's so pointless, but because we live in such luxury and prosperity, we can all afford to do this, and our best athletes aren't out fighting wars or hunting, or they're here throwing a ball around and in front of thousands of people in attendance, and hundreds of thousands of more watching at home.
Yeah, the Romans said the same thing. How'd that work out for them?
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't end so well for them, I guess, right? But they had an impact on the world, though. It's even when things fail, they still change the world.
Yeah. Shoot for the moon, land among the stars, right?
Right. Yeah. When those things are up and running again, it'll be the new normal. Will have established itself again. Whether that's exactly normal as it once was, or something radically different or slightly different, I guess we'll find out, you know?
Yeah. Indeed we will.
Yeah. All right. Any questions for me? Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up. We're at an hour 45 here almost.
Yeah. No, I think we're good. I think we covered a lot here.
I think so too, man. It was good to get back at this whole podcast thing. You know, it was like a little rusty, but I buffed the rust off. We're rolling again, and we're going to get some more coming out this week, so it's exciting.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. It was humbling to be asked.
Oh, thank you for joining me. It was fun talking with you, and keep in touch, and we'll keep this thing moving, you know?
Sounds good, man.
All right, Alex. Thanks for your time, buddy.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.